On this week's episode of Back of the Grid, we are going to review the Chaos Grand Prix. Hello and welcome to another edition of Back of the Grid. I'm your host Stu and I'm joined as always by Chris.
Evening.
And no Tom this week, just I guess Tom just didn't want to talk about whatever carnage that was, because I mean maybe he's sick of following a sport that just doesn't even know what it is anymore.
Took one look and was just like, no.
Yeah. We'll just invent penalties, not watching that. We'll just
show replays of the wrong thing.
Yeah, he will show everyone the wrong thing. We'll our commentary team will just decide that the rule book's not right, even when it is right. Anyway, we'll get into all that. Let's kick straight in, Chris. We've got I've actually, it's rare that I do this, but I've actually written down notes for this little bit.
Boy,
because I've got kind of like a breakdown of the sequence of events that led to
thoughts.
The penalty. But I'll do what you've written in the doc first, and then we'll see if there's any sort of other bits to add. See if there's any clarifications needed. So you go ahead, you take us through it.
Let's maybe do. Obviously, the Norris penalty was kind of the biggest talking point after the race, but I think let's maybe start with everything around that before we talk about the penalty itself and what led to the situation, which is obviously Albon's mirror just yeeting itself into the oblivion. It's so funny.
Have you seen like the onboard of it? It's just there, and then the next frame, literally one frame, it's like just gone. It just disappears.
It looked just went into orbit. It just like went vertical. It was so funny. If
only it had gone into orbit.
Well, yeah. As it was, it landed on the track off the racing line, but sort of just after the pit exit. So, as a rough timeline of what happened, so lap 29 was when the mirror fell off. As Verstappen and Norris started lap 30, double waved yellows went out. I think it was 6 cars passed when it was double wave yellow as Verstappen, Norris, Bottas, Piastri, Leclerc and Sainz. Then lap 31, the double wave yellows were gone and it was just a single yellow at the location. The marshalling system had nothing, just at the location there was a single yellow. Then 2 laps later on lap 33, the single yellow was removed, which obviously indicates the track is clear, but nothing had changed. The mirror was still sat there. Lap 34 was when Bottas then ran over the mirror when he was moving off the racing line to let Leclerc by, which was obviously then followed by Hamilton and Sainz both getting punctured. Again, after Bottas had hit the mirror, no yellows when there was debris everywhere. Then finally, lap 35, we got a safety car. And there's also, I sent you this the other day, Stu, a screenshot of like the race control marshalling system. And all within a single minute. So I'll just tell you the seconds after the minute. It went 18 seconds double yellow in sector 2, 19 seconds DRS disabled, 24 seconds track surface slippery in sector 2, 25 seconds DRS enabled in sector 1 again, 26 seconds double yellow, 27 seconds DRS disabled again, and it just goes on and on and on and on, just like messages pinging off on the marshalling system with DRS coming on and off and yellow seeming to go and disappear.
Do you think a cat walked across race directions?
It's honestly what it looks like, yeah. And it's just... So the FIA have given us their explanation of why it went down the way it is. They said normal practice is for the safety car not to be deployed if there is a small amount of debris and off the racing line. The extensive debris after a car hit the mirror and the punctures that occurred shortly after forced a decision on a safety car. And there's so much wrong with that.
That doesn't quite hold up, does it?
I mean, I wouldn't class it as a small amount of debris for a start.
Well, no, would you? I mean, really, it's like, it's kind of, yes, it's not on the racing line, but we can all see that, like, any car going for an overtake or any car doing what Bottas did, which was obeying blue flags, was going to move onto that section of track. So the argument that it's not on the racing line is it just falls apart because it's still a very active piece of track.
Yeah, it's being used, and at a track where there's only really one overtaking point, they're kind of saying we're happy for that bit of track that is the only overtaking point on the circuit to not be usable for the rest of the race.
Yeah, what are they supposed to do? Just hope no one hits it? Is that what they're doing? Because at best, they're hoping that no one hits it. At worst, they're delaying the inevitable for no reason.
Yeah, and it's just such bizarre decision making. And then there was also the argument that some people said, "Oh, you couldn't do a VSC because the field was so strung out," but I think at the time, the biggest gap between cars on the track was 15 seconds. Under a VSC, that's going to become more like 20, 25, 30.
That's fine. I think that's
gives someone
valid.
time to get out.
No, I think that's valid. I think you don't want people. Yeah, you don't want people running around on track if they're not bunched up like that. When you don't want someone running onto the fastest part of the racetrack, even under VSC.
I guess
to pick up something. If they trip and fall and hurt themselves and then they're stuck somewhere in the track, not only then do you have a mirror that could smash into a million pieces, you've also got a human sat in the way who can't get up because they've fallen over and broken their leg. Anything can happen in that situation. So you don't want that.
Yeah,
that's
I suppose
a really bad situation. But
in that case then, is there anything stopping them? I'm trying to remember if this has ever happened, having a VSC but getting them to go through the pit lane.
I don't think that has happened. I don't think that can necessarily happen. I think you need a safety car for that. But it should have just been. It always should have just been a safety car, regardless of what time the race. I think part of it was they were probably trying not to ruin people's races or affect the race too much by calling a safety car. But at the end of the day, safety cars are there to be called whenever a safety car is required. That's part of the game. That's part of Formula One. And if you're in a situation where the conditions on track warrant a safety car, then you just call the safety car. You don't mess around waiting to not affect things. It's called a safety car for a reason. It's to keep things running safely. I think the whole thing was a bit silly. Obviously, it was only in terms of the size of a Formula One car, it is a very small piece of debris, but the effects that going into that piece of debris theoretically had on the race, I'm not 100% sure it was that debris that caused those punctures, but we'll get to that. Because it seems strange that they were on the left-hand side of the car and all the debris would have been on the right.
I have seen something that said both drivers were worried they had a puncture coming up to that, and obviously at this track in the past we've had puncture issues. So
yeah, but I suppose we'll get to that in a bit when we talk about Ferrari and Mercedes. I think the whole thing was just it's a bit crazy, but fair play to if we want to talk about the penalty, you want to move on to the penalty.
Yeah, we might as well get into it.
Norris was the only driver not to lift, and that's on him. And it is the correct penalty. I went back through the official documents. I did that in my own time. I've gone back through the FIA official documents, searching for yellow flags the whole way through. It's quite easy to do actually, and if you know what you're doing. And there's only the last time it happened at I've got it written down here. It's Austria, I think 2021. Austria 2021, and it happened to two drivers. Everyone's just reported it happened to Mazepin because that's hilarious, isn't it? But it also happened to Latifi. Same race happened to Latifi. They were both given delayed 10-second stop-go penalties, which equates to a 30-second time penalty if it's applied after the race, which on that occasion it was. So that's the most recent instance of that penalty, and it's the correct penalty, I think, because
that's what the rule says.
Even when you go back through qualifying sessions, even in practice sessions, if you go through double yellows without lifting, they come down really, really hard on you every single time. And look, it's on. Verstappen spotted it. Verstappen was aware of the flags around the circuit. He spotted it and he called it, and he did what he did. Norris didn't spot it, and he got a penalty, and he deserved a penalty for it, because that could have been anything happening. That could have been you missing that flag. If there's a marshal on track, if it's double waved yellow, is slow down and be prepared to stop, which none of them really do. But it's usually a lift as a gesture of saying I've seen the flag. And to be fair, a Formula One car does stop fairly quickly.
Pretty quick.
If you've seen the yellow flag, it's likely that you'd probably see a hazard, and you would be able to stop in due time for it. All the other drivers that went through that section during that yellow flag period, double waved yellow flag period, did manage to spot it and slow down. I will excuse a little bit for Norris that the yellow flag on the light board came on just as he was coming up to it, and you could forgive him for missing that, but you still had the physical yellow flags waving at the next section, and then you had a green flag, a green light board immediately after that. So he must have just not seen it, because you'd never just drive through it. He's just not seen it.
I think he had his race engineer in his ear talk about something at the same time as well. So,
well, those radio messages are delayed, so that would have been as it was coming on to the straight, I think, when that radio message came through.
Yeah, because it's
on the broadcast
an awkward place for it. Because
sorry, go on.
It's an awkward place because they tend to prioritise talking to the drivers when they're on the straights, not when they're going through corners, which in this situation was kind of the worst time because it was another distraction. But
and he wouldn't be talking to him going into the braking zone either. That yellow flag was sort of in the braking zone. You never talk to your driver as they're going into the braking zone. So that was a little bit before, but still, like, that is even having just had that message and sort of computing what you've just been told, that would be, I guess, if you're making excuses, a little bit of a distraction for him. But there's just no excuse for it. You've got to see.
Ultimately, it was his mistake.
Yeah, you got to see those flags if you want to. I think where it gets like a bit more murky is when you've got, and they all do it. It's not just Max Verstappen; they all do it. When you've got drivers dobbing each other in so clearly to the stewards, I think that stinks a little bit. And the whole thing with Russell and Verstappen before the race, and that penalty that they just invented to give Verstappen, I think was completely wrong.
Bizarre, that one, wasn't it? Yeah, like
really strange.
If you block someone on a fast lap in qualifying, it's a penalty, no doubt. When you're both on slow laps and one of you happens to be doing the slow lap faster, I understand why Verstappen was upset about that.
I can understand why he was upset about it, but I can also see what he's doing by screaming about it to the media about Russell as well, and trying to drag Russell's name through the mud and sort of being all funny about that. It's like, come on, mate. It's play the game. You play the game. You're all playing the game. Just get over it. Just because someone's doing it to you.
I saw a comment today, which I'd never considered before, basically saying if we ever get in a situation where Russell and Verstappen are fighting for a championship, that's going to make Verstappen and Hamilton look like child's play.
I think
those two have the potential to get really, really messy if they are ever in a fight.
They don't like each other. I think that they've not liked each other since at least Azerbaijan 2022, when Russell sent one up the inside of him into turn 2, and it basically gave Verstappen a taste of his own medicine. It got the apex before him, and got his elbows out, and fair play to him for doing it, because that's exactly what Max Verstappen does to everyone, but Max Verstappen doesn't like it when people do it to him.
But it's only the people who do it back to him that really ever beat him. So
exactly. If you want to beat him, you got to play his game, man. You got to play to his rules.
Don't think Russell's a driver that would shy away from that.
No, exactly. Norris is. I think that's part of the reason Norris is sort of not maybe as far forward in the standings as maybe he might be, because I think if he'd be more willing to stand his ground a bit, and as it's hard because obviously Verstappen will have you off the track and he'll crash. He'll put his car there and say, my car's here, I'll crash, I don't care, because I'm ahead in the points, and if we crash, you're not getting any points either. So that is the attitude. That's quite obvious, and it's working for him, and it's not against the rules, so why not? Fair play to him. Yeah. But you've got to find a way of fighting that, and I think Russell is probably the driver. Russell and Hamilton are probably the two drivers that have come closest to being able to do it. Who've got the sort of what's the word? I don't want to say balls, but it's the willingness to play his game against him.
Take the same level of risk against him that he's prepared to play.
Yeah.
I mean, the hope is next year Mercedes and Ferrari do the business, and we end up with like a Verstappen, Russell, Hamilton, Norris, Piastri title fight. Like
that'd just be brilliant. Like that. Yeah. That is what I'm here for. That is why I watch Formula One.
I think as soon as Hamilton and Russell aren't in the same team anymore, gloves are going to come off even more than they already are between those two as well, because they've had some pretty feisty fights as teammates. But we're getting so sidetracked here.
Very sidetracked.
Just to kind of wrap up this whole thing then, like I think we're in agreement that Norris absolutely deserved that penalty. The penalty is the penalty. You know, that's what it needs to be. Where I can understand McLaren being aggrieved is that the situation was there in the first place. And I do get that part of it. Like that absolutely should have been a safety car from the start.
Well, I think as well, the point, so Andrea Stella was making the point that he was talking about the proportion of the penalty compared to the transgression. Now, obviously, the transgression is the transgression, and the rules are the rules. If you do what Norris did, then you get that penalty. That is what happens. But I think the point he was really getting at was that the FIA or the stewards ought to admit that, or race control ought to admit that they'd kind of cocked that up a bit by, having that situation where they're umming and ahhing about whether it should be a yellow flag. The fact that it was a double wave yellow flag and then it wasn't, and there was no change in between, means that you could argue that that flag was waved as a mistake, and therefore that invalidates the waving of the flag. So you could argue that no penalty is deserved. That's the argument that Stella is trying to make. That's not my argument. That's the argument Stella's trying to make. My argument would be, you drive to the conditions on the track. If there's a flag waving, then and I'm sure the FIA's argument would be that as well, and I think that would be the right argument to make. And as well, if you're Max Verstappen and you've had just a chunk of time taken out of you because someone's not followed the rules behind you,
absolutely,
you are absolutely within your rights to call that out. So
because the argument for the penalty being that harsh is that it is a safety issue. Drivers have to be penalised for doing things that are dangerous on a track where marshals could be on there. Completely correct. But if the situation is dangerous enough that kind of penalty needs to be used, then the situation's dangerous enough to put out a safety car, not to dilly-dally with flags and then say the track's clear and then wait till it gets hit. Like, that's the bit that doesn't match up, is that you can't have it both ways. You can't say the track is a dangerous place and you need to give someone a penalty when you're not prepared to do what needs to be done on a dangerous track.
Yeah, you can't one moment say the track is a dangerous place and then rescind that, having not taken any action against the danger on the track. I think that's the issue.
Absolutely.
In conclusion, I think the correct penalty was applied, but I think the conditions on track should never been such that there would be need to apply a penalty.
100%. I would also posit that having a race director doing his second race ever, being forced to do a sprint weekend, 2 F2 races and an F1 Academy race, maybe not the best situation either, but
maybe not. Have you seen I don't know if you would have seen this, but the FIA, the boss of the FIA is now trying to basically change the rules to make it a closed shop and he can do what he wants. It's like, I noticed that there was an ethics investigation into me and people didn't like that. So how I'm going to fix that is stop any ethics investigations ever going on ever again. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's a fix. It's just mind blown. Yeah. And people want to know where the money's going. Do you know where the money's going? Into the pockets of the people who are voting for him.
I genuinely think, because we've obviously had all these sackings and stuff recently, all of these ethics investigations.
It's all because of this.
I think this is going to reopen the F1 and FIA wound, and that there's going to start being talk of like Liberty
Breakaway
Media
series.
breaking away again. Yeah, I really think that's going to happen soon, because the FIA are just making the sport look like a clown show at the moment.
Well, I mean, yeah, I suppose they are, but I don't know. I don't know if it can even happen though. I think like you can't really. I think FOM rent the name Formula One from the FIA.
They could do everything except call it Formula One if they wanted to.
They'd have to call it Formula 01 or Formula 100.
Formula Infinity.
Formula, yeah, like what do they call it? Like, and then like, you know, it's such a strong brand. Like you can't, like you just can't. Like you can't. I don't think you can break away. I think the best course of action for them is just to find a way of booting him out, giving him the boot somehow. I don't know how they're going to do it, but
yeah, someone needs to find a way.
I do think it needs to happen. I think he's causing a lot of problems, and I think like now, this is not necessarily down to the boss of the FIA, but I think some of the issues that we've got in Formula One around stewarding, and they're not being permanent stewards. I think, you know, for seasons and seasons now, we've been crying out for permanent stewards to be stewarding every single race, and that be their job. And the FIA can afford it because they're making so much money off of blooming fines and things that, you know, they only have to issue a couple of fines and they've got everyone's wages covered for all the race weekends they have to do. So I think it's there's all kinds of issues that need solving at the FIA, and the boss at the top is just one of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've probably got a Christmas party coming up to pay for, so I expect we'll see some fines in Abu Dhabi this weekend.
Yeah, or a new reception.
Right, let's run through everyone else, because we've talked about like two cars all
for ages.
We've mentioned Verstappen. He had that one-place grid penalty, which we've already discussed. Pretty ridiculous.
Should never been. Yeah,
he undid that immediately. Pretty impressive start actually to pass Russell and hold off Norris. I think if not for Norris's penalty, I think we'd have been in for a pretty tight race towards the end. Norris was definitely closing on him towards the end. I mean, at the point he got his penalty, he was within DRS, I think. So it was. Yeah,
he was within DRS because he'd transgressed. But
that's true.
But he was starting. He was just starting to take sort of a couple of tenth and a half a lap out of him at that point, and then that happened, and it was like, oh, we're just being robbed of what's going to be like an absolutely epic climax to this race. So yeah, I think that's the biggest crime. Like, it's not the penalty. It's not necessarily the penalty itself. It's the fact that the fans, once again, have been robbed of a fantastic race at the front, like as we have so many times
through
silly things like this.
He had to survive. I think it was 3 safety car restarts, didn't it? 2 of them he aced. 1 of them he didn't, because the safety car lights weren't working properly. So according to Ted Kravitz, the safety car this year, it was the Mercedes one I think we had this weekend.
Yes, it was.
Has got like a new kind of rear wing thing on the back of the car.
Yes, it
has.
has.
And that's got a set of lights on it as well as the light bar on top.
Yes.
But for the cars in sort of first, second, third, they actually can't see the lights on the top of the car anymore. They can only see the ones on the rear wing.
Yeah.
And somehow, at the point the safety car was coming in, the lights on the top were extinguished, but the lights on the rear wing stayed on.
Yes.
So the cars closest to the safety car didn't think it was coming in, and the cars further back in the train did. Now, I think we're quite lucky that didn't end up with an almighty crash like we had in Mugello a few years ago. Luckily, I think
they did verbally tell all the teams.
Yeah, the engineers are all on it to tell them.
Yeah.
Bit of a mess, though.
Total mess. I mean, how does that happen?
How
they
can
actually
happen?
changed. That was the second safety car period that was during the second safety car, and for the third one they actually swapped cars. They got in the spare safety car and used that for the final safety car.
Ridiculous.
I almost didn't notice that there were 3 safety cars in this race as well, because 2 of them were so close together.
Yeah, safety cars breed safety cars. McLaren, as we knew, could have wrapped up the constructors, but in the end they had lost some ground to Ferrari. it was a pretty good kind of last phase for Norris, who charged back from pretty much last to 10th and picked up fastest lap. So a bit of damage was undone then. Piastri finished third. Do you think he would have won it?
Do you think he could have won it?
I think so. I think that on that track with that wide, that layout of corner, I think he'd have had an easier time passing Verstappen than he has done on other tracks. So yeah, I think Norris probably could well have won that one.
Yeah, and I think he probably would have won it. I think he was so quick at the end. Verstappen, obviously we'll never know Verstappen's true pace, because once that race is over, then Verstappen doesn't have to push anymore. And you just don't know if he would have had the tyre life to get to the end at the same pace as Norris. But I think Norris made a very clear point of his pace towards the end of the race.
Very
and
much
he was
so.
He was like a couple of seconds quicker at one point. So yeah, I think he would have at least had a very good chance. It would have been a fight, and that's what we want. We want a fight.
Piastri came third, possibly could have come second. At the point Bottas hit the mirror and shattered debris everywhere, McLaren brought Piastri in straight away, whereas everyone else around him waited an extra lap for the inevitable safety car, which felt like a bit of a blunder on McLaren's part there and possibly cost them second place, I think. It was almost like they were trying to preempt the safety car and like come in and expect it to be called as they were coming into the pits, and as it was, it just didn't.
Yeah, and of course they would lose out by doing that, because a safety car, a pit stop takes much longer.
Yeah.
In race time, it takes longer during active race than it does. I think if they'd managed to pit him a few laps earlier and he'd like got a bit of an undercut and managed to catch up some of the cars on older tyres and close that gap, then there's a possibility that he could have got a better result. But also, there's just as equal a possibility of a better result by pitting when everyone else pits, because then you've got the same tyre age as everyone. You can fight maybe a little bit harder.
I think earlier or later would have been good for him, but as it was, they picked probably the worst time to do it.
Worst possible time.
Yeah. But yeah, podium nonetheless. Ferrari, who expected to struggle at this race, actually had a pretty solid weekend. I mean, second for Leclerc, Sainz was probably on for fourth, I think, before that puncture. Dropped him to sixth in the end. Yeah, we were talking a little bit about the puncture before. I mean, Sainz wasn't on any like older tyres than everyone else around him at the point he got that puncture. I do think there's probably more to it than just hitting the debris. Maybe the debris sort of possibly exacerbated the problem, but I don't think it's right to say the debris caused the two punctures. But
yeah, I don't think it's solely. At best, it isn't solely the debris that caused the puncture.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the way those tyres have gone, like they kind of, if you go over debris, usually it's quite catastrophic, right? Usually it's like quite a big, it's an instant deflation, and those two punctures didn't really look like instant deflation. They looked kind of like steady deflations, and then you turn in and it's gone. So there's an argument to say that they've just developed slow punctures as a result of impact on the tyre. But only Pirelli know that. We don't know that. We'll never know that.
And I guess you normally do get a Pirelli report in the days after a race, after they've got them back and done an investigation. So
I don't think they'll be adding that into the report on this occasion. I think when
they'll release a report that says our tyres were fine.
Yeah, when they put the work into adjusting the curbs to make them safe for the tyre, and then the tyre still. Potential. I mean, I might be wrong. It might not have been. We're speculating, right?
That's
I don't want Pirelli to come and kneecap me, but Mr. Pirelli. But sorry, just entertaining myself. Yeah, I think whatever the truth, if there is an alternative truth to it, we'll never know.
Let's do Mercedes. Russell just continues to be on a really good run of form at the moment. Second in sprint quali, finished third in the sprint, second in Grand Prix qualifying, running third for the early part of the race, but then had a 7-second pit stop, and that sort of put the end to all of that, really.
Yeah, that kind of killed his race, didn't it?
Yeah, real shame for him, that, because he was on for a decent result. This like closing phase of the season, though, Russell has been super impressive. He's like really seems to have found an affinity with that car as they've improved it throughout the year.
Yeah, you have to hope that they can find further improvements next year for that car, don't you? So they can actually compete and give us all what we want, which is a big 3 or 4 way fight for a world championship,
rather than play catch up again like they have for like the last 3 or 4 years in a row, it feels like.
And please, like a competitor in the same team as Verstappen as well, who can take some points away from him.
Yeah, it's starting to look that way, but we'll get there. Hamilton just had an absolute shocker. To run through his race in brief, he jumped the start, lost 3 places on the opening lap, got a 5-second penalty, was struggling so much he asked if his car was broken. He got a puncture. He got a drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane. He repeatedly asked to retire the car. And then just as the little cherry on top, at the closing stage of the race, he made up about 12 seconds and 3 places, but still only finished 12th and out of the points. He just looks like he doesn't want to be there anymore, does he? Like, it's a man counting down the days to the end of the season. Yeah,
it's so clear to see, isn't it? Like, he's definitely... These last few races, he's looked pretty unhappy and pretty downbeat. He's got a foot out the door, and he's just counting. He's clock watching.
Yeah, and I know with the team radio, like, you only get to hear the select part of it that tells a narrative. But I got extremely bored of hearing him complaining in that race. Like, it felt like every other lap there was a clip of him having a moan. I know it is, but it's like, mate, just like, you pay to drive the car, just drive the car. I don't want to hear you complaining anymore.
But it's just, think about it. If you're used to fighting for championships and race wins and all that, of course you don't want to be there when you're in like that absolute box of a car.
Yeah,
you know. Hamilton, a box of. I mean, Russell seems to be doing all right in it. But, all right, and still not fighting for race wins necessarily, other than Vegas and the other occasions when he has this season.
Leads us nicely onto another driver who spent most of the race complaining, which was Alonso. He was verging on bringing out the old GP2 engine line. He was like constantly moaning about how slow his car was, but like he never really got much screen time, but actually had a really impressive drive, Alonso. They very smartly, under the safety car, brought him in off the mediums, put on the hard tyres that no one liked, and then the next lap, still under the safety car, just came back in and put on another set of mediums. So he did all but 1 lap on the mediums and made it work really well to come home 7th, which for that car right now, 7th is a pretty decent result.
Very good result, especially on like a wild strategy like that.
Yeah. Stroll was involved in that lap 1 collision. He was given the blame for that and got a 10-second penalty.
Yeah, that was a bit harsh, I thought. Like, I don't think that was a penalty. I think that was just racing. He was on the inside of 3 cars and he just like he understeered out a bit, and as is often the case when it's 3 wide on lap 1, I think the car on the outside didn't realise he had 2 cars on his inside, and it was a bit I think 10 seconds of that is pretty harsh. There was plenty of space around him. That's the thing as well. It's not like he's deliberately driven into him or driven him off the track or tried to run him out of road or anything.
And he's
like
not
that.
gone steaming or locked up or anything as well.
No, exactly. It was all quite sensible, and they've just given him a penalty for it. I think it's really harsh.
Yeah. A rare case where we'll defend Lance Stroll there.
Yeah.
Undeserved. Sauber, they scored some points. It happened.
I told you they would. I said they would. I told you mid-season. I said it.
They've avoided the ignominy of finishing the season, with 0. And there were a lot of retirements that helped, but even so, pretty good drive from Joe to avoid the chaos. Like, his pace compared to the cars around it was pretty solid. Impressive drive. Yeah. Very happy for them.
I felt bad for Bottas.
Yeah, Bottas had the pace as well, but I think he was involved in a bit of like early race contact as well, so he picks up a bit of damage. He did briefly run in the points, and then Norris just came steaming past him towards the end. The one silver lining is that finishing 11th means he's no longer last in the championship. He has leapfrogged Logan Sargent to not be last. So I think he's 23rd instead of 24th in a 20-car championship.
Yes, that is true. I saw that. Yeah, that's nice.
An interesting little side thing on that, though. So he overtakes Logan Sargent because both of them have a best result of 11th, but Bottas's second best result is higher than Sargent's second best result, which is how they work these things out. Right. However, Sargent's best result of the season is actually 10th, but it was in a sprint race. So we
don't count.
Well, we count points towards the championship from sprint races, but when it comes to working out the positions when people have equal points, we apparently don't count sprint races.
Yeah, looks that way.
Yeah, slightly weird quirk of the rules, but...
Or maybe a Grand Prix is worth more.
I mean, it is.
Well, yeah.
People care about it for a start.
Yeah. I have to say, I think this format... Now we're done with sprint races for the season.
We are, yes.
I think that this format of doing the sprint has been the most successful that they've tried so far. I think it seems to work the best. I feel like it gives you meaningful running on every day of a race weekend. It stirs up the pack a little bit. I don't think it's viable for every single circuit, and I don't think it would be viable to do for every round of the championship either. I think it'd be a bit much, but I think the sprint, I think it's worked this way. I object to them a lot less. I've warmed to them this season compared to previous seasons. I think they got it completely wrong up until this season. This season it's actually worked. I think it's been engaging and exciting, and I've enjoyed it.
I think what's helped a lot as well is the fact that they now reopen Parc Fermé after the sprint race. Because if we'd have had this weekend's sprint race in the last couple of years, we'd have watched McLaren get a 1-2 and Red Bull really struggle. And that's how the Grand Prix would have played out. Yeah. Whereas now, it gave Red Bull the opportunity to learn from that, make some changes. Suddenly Verstappen's back in the fight and we've got a fight at the front again. Makes it so much more interesting doing it that way.
Absolutely. I think that's probably the key, I think that must be the key, is that because you would, it was basically a mini Grand Prix and you'd know how the race was going to turn out last season, whereas this season it's been very much a standalone event and it's been allowed to, it's effectively a really an extremely competitive practice session, but in the best possible way. I think it's worked out. I think I can get on board with this, with the way that I can honestly say that I was so objectionable to them before, but I think this season I might even stop criticising them. I've enjoyed them that much. They've been really good.
Yeah, I mean, credit to them for trying different things and messing with the format until I've found something that seems to work. And if we're going to have them, this seems like the best version of it we're going to have. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I might have been saying this from the start of sprint races.
Weird, right?
I'm not sure.
If we're not going to have reverse grid races, then I think this is the next best thing.
Yeah. Oh, that was it. Yeah, reverse grid.
Yeah.
I think maybe you could do it for the first sprint race. You could maybe do reverse championship grid. I'm not averse to a reverse championship grid sprint race, but if we're never going to do that, then I will accept this.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alpine.
Last couple of teams. So Alpine. So Gasly first. Back-to-back points finishes for him. Another really good drive to finish fifth. Gasly's another driver who's just really come on strong towards the back end of the season. Probably as good as Gasly's ever driven, actually, in the back end of this season. He's had some really good seasons in the past and fallen off, but he's been really impressive this year.
Yeah, he's stuck with it.
Ocon, meanwhile, he was out in that turn one collision we've discussed. And it's now turned out not just out of the race, but out for the season.
Out of the team. Yeah, gone.
He sort of made a comment in passing in the post-race interviews that all the media went, I'm sorry, what? And then the weird thing is they interviewed Ollie Oakes, the team principal, and he didn't seem to know for certain who his drivers were going to be, because this is all Flavio's doing. And this continues to be the problem Alpine have had for a number of years now, which is the team principal has less influence on the way the team is run than any other team principal up and down the grid. But that's by the by. It seems like basically they've come to an agreement where Ocon's going to sit out the last race and allow Jack Doohan to make his debut in Abu Dhabi rather than wait until next year. And in exchange, Ocon will be allowed to do the post-season test for Haas, who is his new team next year.
A quid pro quo.
A quid pro quo. The sad part is that Ocon's posted a load of stuff on social media today, basically saying sorry to everybody at the two Renault factories, Alpine factories, that I'm not going to be able to come and see you and say a proper goodbye anymore, and also showed off the special helmet he had got ready for his final race with Alpine. So this mutual decision doesn't sound quite as mutual as they make it out to be, but I mean,
sounds a bit like a sacking.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's all right for both parties, honestly. Like, Alpine are in a bit of a constructors fight, but Ocon's not really been scoring in the last few. Obviously, they had that double podium in Brazil, but other than that, Ocon's definitely been the lesser of the two drivers.
Yeah,
it'll be good to get him with his new team a bit early. It'll be good to have Alpine's new driver do a sort of no pressure race before he's in the deep end. So, kind of works out, but
yeah, unless Doohan has an absolute complete and utter shocker, then he's got a whole winter for them to decide who to replace him with. But we'll see how that goes. Final one.
Finally, Perez, another pretty disastrous weekend. I mean, that spin he had was a really weird one. It looked almost like his rear axle locked or something. Like that didn't look to me like a driver mistake spin, but
I don't know. It
maybe
it looked like a little bit of a clumsy place and time to stamp your foot on the throttle to me.
Possibly he caused the spin and then that did something.
Yeah, I think
to
that's
the car that
case.
caused it to seize up.
Yeah,
either way, it wasn't.
Well, it was the clutch that wouldn't engage after that. I think it must have just blown the clutch into a million pieces by the sounds of it. But
and then the sprint race where he started from the pit lane and just didn't go, which was another just
that was so
thing.
You know what I'm going to say? I mean, that was stupid. Like you've got one job when you're sat at the end of that pit lane and you're waiting for a race to start. Your eyes should be on those lights, and you go as soon as those lights go out. He was sat there 3.5-4 seconds before he even moved, and the car behind, who was it? It was
Colapinto.
It's Colapinto, yeah. The car behind was like, "What's he doing?" And then he just drove around him. Kind of drove around. He didn't drive around him until after they'd gone around. But even away, he was like really slow away. When he went.
Very odd.
And then he said that it was he wanted to make a gap.
He wanted to be in clean air, like.
Yeah, and he said, I want it to be in clean air, and then the interviewer said, is that why you let Colapinto pass? And then he was still behind Colapinto laps later.
Yeah, and also it's a sprint race, so why would you want to be in clean air? Like, I don't know.
Well, it's obviously not true, isn't it? It's obviously made a mistake and he's trying to cover it up.
The tide definitely seems to be moving back against him again now. Christian Horner in an interview said something like what he decides to do after Abu Dhabi will be his decision, but he's old enough now to know what's best for him or something like that.
To do the right thing, he said. I watched that interview happen. It was a Sky interview, I think that was it, and it was very much one of those interviews that said he's, without saying it in as many words, that driver won't be driving for us next season.
It was, we're holding the door open and he can choose to walk through it on his own.
Yeah. But so what do you do then if you're Perez? Like, do you go or do you... Because I guess like one route is saying I'm retiring from Formula One. He clearly doesn't want to retire from Formula One. And if he does that, then no one's... I mean, I think I'd struggle to find a team that would touch him with a barge pole at the moment anyway, but if you retire from Formula One at this low ebb in your career, then you're not coming back. Whereas if Red Bull give you the boot, there's probably more of a chance of you going somewhere else because you're full of Red Bull secrets.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder if, much like Bottas, they're going to try and do what Hulkenberg did and like stick around as a third driver and then hope something opens up in a year or two's time.
Yeah.
But supposedly, if he does leave, he'll get about $20 million payday because he already had a contract to drive. So
nice.
It's a pretty sweet way to step away.
I don't think he's desperate for cash, to be honest. But
no. Who do you reckon they'll put in his place if he does go?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I don't think they know.
Well, Tsunoda's going to be driving this year's Red Bull in a post-season test, so
that'd be nice.
Maybe that's
to
an
see.
audition.
Is Tsunoda going to be able to hold a candle to Verstappen? No way.
Is anyone though? Like,
is Lawson?
Honestly, what the f*** are we doing here?
I've seen so far.
Wait, way too early.
I think he's had a good start. I think he's performed relatively well, but I don't think he's sort of setting the world on fire the way that everyone sort of thought he was gonna at the start of his run with Formula One. He's quietly been sort of getting on with it, I suppose, but I think I'd like to see a bit more from him, really.
Yeah.
And then there's a question of, are the drivers elsewhere that they could take? Bottas probably. I don't think Bottas is interested in going there. I think he's more interested in staying at Mercedes and working there rather than
maybe getting.
Probably if let's be real. If any team come knocking on Valtteri Bottas's door and saying we'll give you a drive, he's going to take that drive. And I think Mercedes would free him up for that drive as well. But they give Ricciardo a call? Like, I don't know.
Imagine if they brought Ricciardo back.
Yeah, that'd be the best day ever.
Yeah. Should do a quick couple of awards?
Yeah.
Drive of the day.
You know what? Maybe go a bit off the wall and say Alonso for quietly bringing that absolute banger home, 7th.
I think Alonso's a shout. Gasly 5th place is a pretty damn good drive.
Yeah.
And I think we have to mention Zhou as well for hanging on for those points.
Yeah. Someone in the comments is like screaming, or someone is sat there, some fan is screaming Max Verstappen. But look, we don't tend to give it to the winner of the race, really.
Or if we'd have had a situation where Max Verstappen had to fight for a win, that would have been nice too. Maybe if he had spent the last 15 laps holding off Norris, we'd have been like, Max Verstappen.
Yeah,
but
totally.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Thanks, FIA.
Possibly Russell. 4th place with that kind of when Hamilton was having clearly a shocker, and Mercedes obviously didn't have their best situation either, but Russell seemed to do everything he could with that car to bring it 4th. That was decent.
And I think actually if you extend it to the whole weekend, I think Russell is definitely driver of the weekend. He did an exceptional job. We're adding more to the pile now and not narrowing it down.
Yeah, you could always give it to Verstappen for being pretty flawless.
I almost want to give it to Zhou.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Give it to Zhou for getting
let's give
points.
It to Zhou. Why not?
Points in the worst car. Yeah.
What about move of the day?
Move of the day was Verstappen's push of the radio button to remind the FIA that the yellow flag had been.
I did win it for it. Verstappen's start was pretty damn good.
Oh yeah, his start was amazing. Yeah, that's my move of the day.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of overtakes, and they were basically all the same into turn 1. So I should give Verstappen's start.
Yeah, I think Verstappen's start's absolutely worth move of the day.
And then finally,
honestly, what the f*** are we doing here?
Where do we begin?
Yeah, I think that soundbite just encapsulates it so well this weekend as well, doesn't it? Like, what are we doing here? So I think Verstappen's single place grid job, which is a penalty that just doesn't exist. That's definitely one candidate. We've got the world feed and the highlights showing just the wrong lap for Norris's penalty, for Norris's transgression. Like, they showed the wrong piece of footage. They show him going past like a slippery surface marker board, and they don't show you don't see it's not the actual shot when the transgression occurred, because that's just so dumb. Just at least get the right lap, at least show the right lap. Come on, guys.
It's like in a football match, a penalty being given, and then they show a replay of a different tackle.
Yeah, it's literally that. It's exactly that.
It's
if you know what you're watching, then mental. Absolutely. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know who they're doing the highlights this weekend, but they dropped the ball there. But even you can actually forgive the people doing the highlights for dropping the ball there, because it was the comms that called it wrong, and the world feed that called it wrong as well. The replay they showed, because all the highlights would do is go back, find the replay, and use that. And they got the wrong replay. The replay should have been the lap before, where the light just comes on just as it's going out of shot, and then you see, then you stop it and you see the yellow double wave flags that are quite clearly there for all to see. Another one I had was I'm drawing a blank.
There's obviously the entire situation around the mirror being on track and the wrong things happening about it.
Yeah.
That whole situation just epitomised the WTF. Yeah.
Just the wrong... Not calling a safety... it was so clearly going to be a safety car. It had to be a safety car. This... You could argue that those punctures, if they are to do with... Whether they're to do with the debris or whether they're to do with tyres wearing out, whatever they're to do with, you could argue that those punctures are a direct result of this indecision to not call a safety car, because those drivers, all the teams knew that mirror was on track. So at that point they're waiting for a safety car. It's the worst possible time to make a pit stop, because you're going to lose a load of time when the safety car's called and everyone else comes in and makes their pit, and it costs them half the amount of time. So they're going to stay out and wear their tyres beyond the point of the life of the tyre in that situation, and that's the direct result of them not going a safety car. What else we got? There were some other things.
There was so many crashes throughout the race that we've not even got into as well. Just a lot of very clumsy stuff going on. Yeah,
Hulkenberg into turn one was pretty hectic. He was all locked up and on hard tyres at the start of the race, just going for an alternative strategy and just piling in like he's on softs. There was just Perez's spin. Perez's spin under the safety car. The safety car
having two different sets of lights on it. It's just all of it. Should we just put all of it?
I think there has to be one stand out, and I think it just has to be. I think it's probably just the outcome of the mirror being on track. I think in general is what I would call the WTF, because it was just carnage. And then around all that, you've got the FIA off track, all the craziness going on outside of the actual racing.
We can go with that.
Mental.
Right, I'll very quickly run through predictions.
Just
it won't take long because it was a grim week. Out of us three, only Tom scored a single point. He got Ocon first DNF. And out of everybody who played along, the highest score was a mere 2 points that only two people got. It was that kind of race. For anyone who's interested, no one got Perez's finishing position right, so a couple of people got half points for that. One of which was Tom, actually. So Tom got 1.5 points. And that's it. It's just grim. Everyone did terribly. It was that kind of race. If you want to see how you did, you can go to the website to take a look, backofthegrid.com. But let's have a quick chat about Abu Dhabi, the final race of the season. And we have championship permutations still. Drivers is wrapped up, but the constructors is still very much open. McLaren need 24 points to seal the title for the first time for them since 1998, regardless of what Ferrari do. So third and fifth is enough for McLaren to seal the title, which you would hope they would be able to manage. Third and fifth doesn't sound too high a result for where they've been in recent races, but I think Ferrari will be better at this circuit than they were in Qatar. So I think it will be
I think it'll be tight. I think it's going to be close.
This circuit tends to throw up strange races and strange results as well. So
yeah, it's just, do you trust Ferrari to make the best of it,
to execute it?
Yeah, they've got, they've had a good season. Their strategy has been better this season, but they have slipped up here and there as well. So while they're getting better, they're not quite there yet, and I think they just can't be trusted to seal this deal. I don't think either team can be trusted to actually, grab it by the horns.
They're both operating like teams that don't want to win the constructors' title. Ferrari would need to outscore McLaren by 22 points, though, that would take a lot for that to happen. Not impossible, but Ferrari basically need a 1-2 or a 1-3, and then hope McLaren drop sort of down the order.
Yeah,
which could happen. I mean, it happened at the race we've just watched, so.
Yeah.
Norris second in the drivers is actually not nailed on anymore either. Leclerc's only 8 points off, so that could still swap hands as well.
What did I say? I said Leclerc would be, if he doesn't win the championship, he could be beating Norris by the end of the season. And here we are,
quietly creeping up on him.
Yeah, it's within his grasp. Well, not within his grasp. It's just outside. He's got his fingertips on it.
Not impossible. Red Bull can still technically catch Ferrari for second in the constructors, but basically they'd need a double podium and Ferrari to score next to nothing. So
not happening.
Probably not going to happen. The tightest fight on the grid, other than the constructors title, is for sixth. Alpine and Haas have swapped places in the last few races multiple times. As it stands, Alpine are ahead on 59 points. Haas are 5 behind, and RB are another 8 behind. So any one of them could pick up that sixth place, which is worth tens of millions of dollars to them.
That'd be worth watching, wouldn't it? So we need to. So our drivers to watch in the next race are the 2 Haas drivers, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, the 2 Alpine drivers, Doohan and Gasly, and of course you'll be watching what the Ferraris do and the McLarens do.
I mean, that'd be a great debut for Doohan if he can have a good result and go win several $1 million for his team.
Yeah, I mean, that's that. You get a warm welcome when you did that. Which brings us on finally to predictions for the final race of the season. I'm going to make you go first. Who's going to be your fastest in Q3? I'm going to go Leclerc.
He's going
the most overrated driver in Formula One, Leclerc.
Get one more in before the season.
Yeah.
We've got Tom's predictions. He has gone for Verstappen for fastest. So I'll go one different, and I will say, I almost want to say Russell after the last few races, but I don't think this is going to be as good a track for Mercedes. So I'm going to say Norris. Which means let's say Tom can go first for winner. He's gone for a double max. I'm going to go for a Norris win, I think. I think McLaren are going to do the business.
Yeah, I was going to say Norris as well for the win. I think, again, it's tyre life. They're so much better on the tyres than the other two their rival teams, their nearest rivals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got there in the end.
First DNF. I think that's me first. I'm going to go for someone in that. Oh, you know what I'm going to say Gasly.
Ooh.
And then the championship fight is all going to be on Doohan's shoulders from that point onwards.
I'm going to go Magnussen. I think he's going to get sort of Larry.
Finish with a bang.
Yeah.
Tom has gone for a similar one. He's gone for Lewis Hamilton, ending his Mercedes career on a low.
Oh, that would be rubbish. That
would be terrible.
Cruel.
I really hope
that's goblin mode behaviour from Tom.
That's the classic. I'm not going to predict this because I'm usually wrong, and I hope it continues to be that way.
Yeah, I hope so.
Number of finishes, Stu.
Loads of runoff in this one. Not many places to crash unless you're Nicholas Latifi. I'm going to go. Move on. 70.
I think I agree with you on 17. Tom has gone for 18. And finally, our last random driver of the season, we've thrown them all back in the pot, and it is Liam Lawson.
Yeah, who are 13 points off 6th, we should point out. That's RB, VCARB, whatever we're calling. Do you think VCARB will change their name next year? I hope they do.
I've heard rumblings that they are going to change their name yet again, yeah.
Good, because it was a stupid name.
It is an abysmal name.
Yeah.
Tom's got Liam Lawson in 14th. I'm going to have him in 15th.
I'm going to go unlucky for some 13th.
Nice. And that's it, our final predictions of the season. If you want to make yours, as ever, you can go to backthegrid.com where you can enter your predictions. They are open now, I believe. I don't know if Tom has put Jack Doohan into the website yet. However, if you want to put yours in nice and early, if you want to choose Doohan for any of your options, just choose Ocon if he's still there, and Tom will do the swap. But I will make sure he's done that before the weekend. It's a normal race weekend, so you can wait until the start of Q1 to put your predictions in. And that's about it. So we'll be back next week for our final race review of what has been a very long season. So please do join us for that one. You can get in touch with us in all the usual places between now and then. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of that stuff. Patreon.com if you want to join our little Discord community for a little chat while we watch along with the races. But I think that's everything. So until next time, thanks again for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.
Oh, goodness.